Let me tell you about a country that 70 years ago had a thriving democracy, a popular leader chosen by its own people, a government that looked at its land, looked at its resources, and said, "This belongs to us, to our people." Within 2 years, that government was gone, that leader was in prison, and a king chosen by foreign powers was sitting on the throne. That country is Iran. And what I'm going to show you today is not an opinion. It is documented history. Some of it only became public because the CIA themselves eventually admitted it. So before you take a side on the Iran you see in today's headlines, hear the full story first. Because it starts not with missiles or nuclear threats. It starts with oil and a man named Mossadegh. Iran had oil, a lot of it, sitting beneath Iranian soil, discovered in the early 1900s. A British company, the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, which you might know today as BP, had signed a deal with Iran. And the deal was, to put it simply, deeply unfair. The profits flowed mostly to Britain. Iranians, whose land this was, got almost nothing in return. For decades, this continued. Iranian workers worked in the oil fields. British executives took the profits home, and Iran had little say in any of it. Then, in 1951, something changed. Mohammad Mossadegh was elected as Iran's prime minister. He was a lawyer. He was educated in Europe. He was not radical. He was not violent. He was a Democrat who wore suits and believed in parliaments and elections. And he said one thing that made the entire Western world panic. This oil belongs to Iran. He nationalized the oil industry, gave it back to the Iranian people. The Anglo-Persian Oil Company was told to leave. Britain was furious. They went to the United States and told them this man was a communist, a threat to the region. The word communist was a magic word in the 1950s. It opened every door. But Mossadegh was not a communist. He never was. He was a nationalist. He simply wanted Iran to benefit from Iranian resources. That's it. In 1953, the CIA and British MI6 ran a joint covert operation. Operation Ajax in America, Operation Boot in Britain. They bribed Iranian military officials. They hired people to cause riots in the streets. They spread propaganda through newspapers they controlled. They created the appearance of chaos, and then used that chaos to justify removing the elected government. Mossadegh was arrested, put under house arrest. He lived that way for the rest of his life, and died never having been free again. Iran's first democracy was not destroyed by Iranians. It was destroyed by Washington and London. Because Iran wanted to own its own oil, after the coup, the Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was firmly placed back in power. He had been there before, but now he was fully dependent on Western support to stay on the throne. The oil contracts were renegotiated. Western companies came back in. The profits began flowing again, out of Iran and into Western hands. The Shah built roads. He built some universities. He presented himself to the world as a modernizer, and Western governments loved him for it. He appeared on magazine covers. He was welcomed at the White House. He was called a great friend and ally. But inside Iran, a very different story was playing out. The Shah created a secret police force called Savak. It was built and trained with direct CIA involvement. And Savak's job was simple: destroy any opposition to the Shah's rule. Political prisoners were tortured. Activists disappeared. Journalists, students, academics, anyone who criticized the government risked their life. Iranians could not speak freely, could not protest, could not organize. And all the while, they watched their country's wealth leave, while they lived under fear. For 26 years, this continued. And the Western governments who claimed to care about freedom and democracy, they said nothing. Because the Shah kept the oil flowing, because he kept the region stable. For them, the Shah was not a king for Iranians. He was a manager installed by the West to protect Western interests. And Iranians paid the price for 26 years. By 1979, Iranians had reached a breaking point. And what's important to understand, the revolution was not just religious people. It was students. It was workers. It was women. It was leftists. It was nationalists. It was almost everyone, united by one shared feeling: enough. The Shah fled the country. Iranians celebrated in the streets. For the first time in 26 years, they felt free. Ayatollah Khomeini returned from exile in France and became the face of the new Iran. And slowly, what had been a broad revolution with many voices became controlled by one. The Islamic clergy consolidated power. Others who had fought for the revolution, the women's rights activists, the liberals, the leftists, were gradually pushed out. Some were imprisoned. The Islamic Republic was established, a system where religious authority sits above political authority. And the supreme leader, not the elected president, holds the real power. Iran had freed itself from one form of control, but the revolution built its own. Right after the revolution, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, was created. Its original job was to protect the new Islamic Republic from foreign threats. And after what happened in 1953, that fear of foreign interference was completely real. But over the decades, the IRGC grew into something much larger than a military force. Today, it has its hands in construction, oil, media, telecommunications. It became not just a force, but a state within a state. Similar to how in every country, real power tends to sit with the most powerful institutions. Iran is no different in that way. The supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, sits above all of this. The elected president has real limits on his power. Real decisions flow through the supreme leader and the structures around him. And yes, Iranian people have protested. The 2009 Green Movement, the 2019 protests, the 2022 Mahsa Amini protests. These are real grievances from real people. But it is also documented that foreign intelligence and funds has historically used protest movements in Iran as an opportunity to push for regime change. That does not make Iranian suffering fake. It means the situation is more complex than your news channel tells you. Now, here is what the same media almost never shows you. After the revolution, despite all the chaos, despite the war, despite decades of sanctions, Iran made extraordinary progress for its own people. Female literacy in Iran was just 24% in 1976 under the Shah. By 2016, it had risen to over 80%. Today, nearly 60% of all university students in Iran are women. Iran's female literacy rate is now above the global average. Life expectancy for Iranian women went from 58 years in 1979 to nearly 78 years by 2018. Iran built infrastructure across the country: roads, hospitals, schools, reaching rural areas that the Shah's government largely ignored. And petrol. Iran has the cheapest petrol in the entire world, just 3 cents per liter. In the West, you pay around $1.80 per liter. That is oil wealth being used for Iranian people, not for foreign corporations. All of this achieved under the harshest sanctions in modern history. So here is what I want you to hold in your mind. Iran's oil sits outside the petrodollar system. Iran refuses to sell in US dollars or take orders from Washington. That, not nuclear weapons, not terrorism, is what makes Iran a target. 85 million people, young, educated, connected to the world, living in a country being strangled not because of what their government does to them, but because of what their government refuses to do. So why is Iran in the headlines again today? Why the missiles, the threats, the talk of war? First, resources. Iran still sits on some of the largest oil and gas reserves on the planet. That has not changed since 1953. Second, Iran is one of the last major powers in the region that refuses to operate inside the system the West has built. It is threat to Zionism's Greater Israel ideology, which will control a big part of the Middle East. It refuses to normalize. It openly supports Palestinian resistance. It trades outside the US dollar in ways that challenge American financial dominance. Third, feminist ideology. For decades, Western countries pushing the feminist ideology, which make it a big excuse to attack Iran and many other countries, but it is nothing more than a propaganda, because very first day of USA-Israel war on Iran, they bombed girls' school, killing 165 schoolgirls and staff. In 1953, they used a coup. Today, they use missiles and sanctions. The goal has not changed. A compliant Iran serving outside interests with no power to say no. I want to be honest with you. Iran's government is not perfect. That is true and important, and it deserves its own honest conversation. But here is what is also true. In 1953, their democracy was taken from them. Not by Iranians, by outside powers who wanted their oil. For decades, their economy has been strangled by sanctions, while ordinary people, not the government, suffered most. And today, bombs have fallen on Iranian soil. The same narrative from 1953 is being told again, just with different words. The Iranian people deserve better, from their own government, and from the governments that have been interfering in their country for 70 years. Real change in Iran will come from Iranians, not from sanctions that starve ordinary people, not from bombs that destroy infrastructure. That path has been tried everywhere in this region. Look at the results. Before you believe the next Iran headline, just ask, who benefits from you seeing Iran as the enemy, and who has benefited from that story for the latest 70 years? If this gave you something to think about, share it with someone who deserves the full picture. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what you think. I'll see you in the next one.